All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating concept in football history, tactical equilibrium. You know, when we think about the absolute most explosive, relentless attacking teams ever to play the game, we almost always focus on the goal scorers, right? The dazzling wingers, the highly creative midfielders. But to balance the scales, to keep those hyper-offensive systems from just completely falling apart at the seams, they needed a very specific kind of anchor. They needed what we call a calculated fullback.
So, that begs the question, how exactly do you balance the most explosive attacking teams in history? How did these legendary, forward-thinking squads avoid just collapsing under their own offensive weight? Well, the answer usually isn't found in the superstars grabbing all the headlines. Instead, it's found in the intelligent, highly adaptable defenders who literally held the entire structure together. They were the ones pulling the strings at the back, allowing everyone else to just fly forward.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at two remarkable, totally contrasting characters who perfectly embodied this role, just in different eras. On one hand, we've got the dentist, Jim Craig. He was a pragmatic, super hardworking, educated Scottish amateur who eventually turned pro. And on the other hand, we have the playboy-turned-preacher, Ruud Krol, a stylish, rebellious, and technically gifted Dutch cosmopolitan. Honestly, you couldn't find two guys with vastly different backgrounds and personalities, yet both of these men became the absolute essential anchors for two of football's greatest ever attacking systems.
Section 1. The Lisbon Lion Dentist. Let's travel back in time a bit to Glasgow in the 1960s to meet Jim Craig. Now, Craig wasn't exactly your typical working-class footballer coming from the mines or the shipyards. Not at all. He was actually an amateur university dental student playing for Glasgow University's First 11, but his undeniable work ethic completely transformed him into the pragmatic anchor of the legendary Celtic squad, a team famously known as the Lisbon Lions. He seamlessly blended right into that blue-collar dressing room, eventually signing professional terms with Celtic in January 1965. And there's this brilliant, hilarious story about his dad from the day Craig dropped his dental studies to sign the contract. His dad looked at him and said, "There are a lot of dentists, son, but not everyone gets a chance to sign for Celtic." Which, he hit the nail on the head there for sure.
The truly crucial point here is the sheer magnitude of the impact Craig had. Just look at this massive trophy haul. 7 league titles, 4 Scottish Cups, 4 League Cups, and the ultimate prize, the 1967 European Cup. Now, Craig himself was pretty humble. He noted he was probably the least naturally gifted player in the squad. Some folks even labeled him the weakest point in what was otherwise a phenomenal side. But make no mistake, his honest, incredibly hardworking presence was the absolute bedrock. It was the foundation that allowed Celtic's relentless, overlapping attack to just thrive.
Take the absolute pinnacle of his career, the 1967 European Cup final against Inter Milan. Talk about an emotional roller coaster. Literally just 7 minutes into the match, Craig concedes a highly controversial penalty. To this day, he maintains it was never a penalty, by the way. But it puts Celtic behind early. Then, at halftime, legendary manager Jock Stein comes over, throws a supportive arm around him, and tells him not to worry, just go out and show them what he could do. And wow, in the second half, Craig did exactly that. He surged forward and delivered this perfectly measured pass to assist Tommy Jamel's equalizing goal. He went from zero to hero on the absolute biggest stage imaginable.
But here's the kicker. After the game, with the European Cup totally secured, Jock Stein's tone shifted dramatically. He absolutely scolded Craig, saying, "What on earth were you thinking about at the penalty? What a stupid tackle. You almost cost us the European Cup with that daft tackle." It perfectly illustrates Stein's famously demanding Jekyll and Hyde management style. He knew exactly which buttons to push and when to push them to keep his defensive anchor perfectly disciplined and grounded.
Part 2. The Total Football Architect. All right, let's pivot from the Scottish grit of the 1960s over to the Dutch elegance of the 1970s.
This brings us to our second anchor, Ruud Krol. Now, back in his youth, Krol was actually known as this ungovernable, night-clubbing party guy. We're talking silk shirts, velvet pants, the whole shebang. And it deeply frustrated his strict, authoritarian manager, Rinus Michels. But he eventually settled down and evolved into Michels' most trusted on-pitch lieutenant for both Ajax and the Netherlands. What made Krol so incredibly effective was his legendary fullback partnership with right-back Wim Soer-Beer. They were affectionately dubbed Snabble and Babble, and this duo was literally the defensive engine that made total football possible. Their combined discipline and insane ability to read the game provided this crucial safety net. It allowed the rest of the team to execute those beautiful fluid positional interchanges they were famous for.
You have to understand, total football placed immense, almost impossible demands on a defender. You couldn't just sit back and relax. Kroll's role required seamless positional fluidity. One minute he's shifting into midfield, the next he's out on the wing. He had to slalom past opponents just to launch attacks and then execute these pinpoint 60-yard Hollywood passes, which Johan Cruyff highly encouraged, by the way. Yet, at the exact same time, he had to maintain what people called a Fort Knox-like defense to anchor the forwards. It was a role that demanded absolute supreme technical ability and crazy tactical intelligence.
To put his indispensability into perspective, just consider this staggering statistic: 21 hours and 30 minutes. That's how long Ruud Krol played across both the 1974 and 1978 World Cups. In fact, he is the only man in history to have played every single possible minute of those two tournaments. He was the absolute constant, the physical and tactical linchpin for a Dutch side that dazzled the entire world and reached 2 consecutive finals.
Section 3. Royalty in Naples. Let's move forward a bit to 1980. So after achieving basically everything he could with Ajax, Krol was looking for a new challenge. And he certainly found one, moving to Italy to try and lift a struggling Napoli side. But getting to Naples, that was a totally chaotic journey. After 12 years at Ajax, he initially signed a 4-year deal with the Vancouver Whitecaps over in the North American Soccer League for around €363,000. But get this, barely a week into his time in Canada, a Napoli director literally shows up on his doorstep. Following a really brief 7-month loan stint where he had to adjust to playing on artificial turf, they negotiated a permanent transfer for €520,000. Suddenly, Krol is jet-setting right back to Europe, making a totally jet-lagged but game-winning debut in Naples.
And what followed was just sheer Krol mania. I mean, he was instantly elevated to godlike status in the city. He couldn't even walk into a local fashion store without being totally mobbed and needing a police escort to get out. Dozens of local fishermen would constantly pinch his cheeks until he literally smelled of rotten fish. One total stranger even gifted him a year's supply of free pasta and wine. And the Napoli kit man, he famously said he treated Krol's boots like the cheek of a little baby. It's wild. His tactical leadership and elegant style of play just immediately captivated the entire city.
But his time in Naples was also marked by profound tragedy. In 1980, a devastating earthquake struck the region, leaving 2,500 people dead and 250,000 people homeless. It was an incredibly dark time. Krol and the Napoli football team had to take on a role that went way beyond sports. They became this vital temple of emotional healing and unity for the city. During their very first match back, the stadium was packed way beyond capacity. The grieving city desperately needed their team, and Krol was right there, ready to lead them through the darkness. Now, his leadership style in Italy did take some, let's say, eccentric turns. There's this crazy story where, following a bad loss, the Napoli coach actually brought a magician into the dressing room to cut locks of the players' hair for good luck. I know, right? But during this bizarre session, the magician turns to Krol and tells him he simply isn't being vocal enough on the pitch. And Krol realized the guy was absolutely right. He'd sort of assumed his teammates already knew what to do. He later admitted, "I stopped doing it because by now the players should know it all, but they needed it." So, the magician throws the hair into the goals before the next match, Napoli wins, and Krol goes right back to vocally commanding his team. Part 4. The Human Legacy. Let's ground this explainer for a moment by looking at the very real physical and mental tolls exacted by this incredibly demanding role once the peak footballing years are over. Very poignantly, in May 2025, Jim Craig's family revealed that he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Craig had actually reflected on the dangers of his era before, noting how he actively tried to head those heavy, soaked leather balls as little as humanly possible because he was fully aware of the potential damage even back then. It serves as a really stark, heartbreaking reminder of the long-term realities that players from past generations have to face today. You see, Jim Craig actually walked away from the sport pretty early, retiring at just 29. He freely admitted that playing the fullback role in the Lisbon Lions' overlapping system had just taken way too heavy a physical toll on his body, and he returned to his comfortable career in dentistry. Ruud Krol, on the other hand, suffered a severe knee injury during his 3rd season at Napoli, and literally, just as his body started giving out, the club pushed him out. Why? To make the financial room necessary to sign the ultimate attacking superstar, Diego Maradona. That move sent Krol off on a nomadic, global coaching career. Which brings us to our final provocative thought for today. Could the attacking superstars of today even exist without the calculated fullbacks standing right behind them? Whenever we celebrate the incredible goal scorers and those beautiful, fluid attacking systems, we really must remember the true cost and the enduring value of the tactical anchors. It's the Craigs and the Crawls of the world who sacrifice their bodies and dedicate their minds to maintain that crucial equilibrium. Because at the end of the day, that's what makes beautiful football possible. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.